Today, it seems like a lot of Americans are arguing over the news media. Fake news, who to trust and who not to trust, how fair or unfair we are. We dug into a recent eye-opening survey by Pew Research Center.
You've now said that he is being investigated after saying that you didn't.
No.
You just said,
no, he's
sir,
not being investigated.
you just said that he's being investigated.
Russia hysteria or top-notch reporting.
And it's a grotesque abuse of power by the President of the United States.
So help me God.
Coverage of candidate and President Donald Trump has pumped up deep party divides when it comes to attitudes about the news media.
In 2017, we decided to re-ask a number of questions on Americans' media attitudes that we already had asked in 2016.
Katerina Matza is a senior researcher at the Pew Research Center.
In the early days of the Trump administration, what did you learn about whether Americans feel that news media criticism of political leaders is productive or not productive?
That was one of the widest gaps that we saw between Republicans and Democrats.
Historically, Republicans are more likely to see media criticism as a positive thing if there's a Democrat in the White House and vice versa. But today's divide is the largest by far in the 32 years that Pew has been asking the question. Nearly 90% of Democrats say news media criticism serves to keep leaders in line, but less than half of Republicans say the same.
That was a 47 percentage point gap between Republicans and Democrats on that question.
Is that a big difference from past surveys?
From 2016, that is a big difference.
In fact, in early 2016, in the middle of presidential primary season, Democrats and Republicans saw eye to eye on this particular question. At that time, support for the media's watchdog role was about the same among Democrats and Republicans. Before now, the biggest gap was under President George W. Bush, when Democrats were 28 points more likely than Republicans to appreciate the media as watchdog.
He is under investigation today.
Pew also measured interest in national news and found an increase. 33% a year ago said they closely followed national news. That's now up to 40%. But the increase is due almost entirely to Democrats. Their level of interest jumped from 33% to 49%. And what about bias?
There's a strong party split when it comes to perceived media fairness. What is it?
Yes, and what we found was that Republicans are actually more likely than Democrats to say that news organizations tend to favor one side.
87% of Republicans said news organizations tend to favor one side. Only about half of Democrats said so. That's the widest gap between the two parties since the George W. Bush administration in 2007. Another partisan divide is evident when it comes to trust in national news organizations. 34% of Democrats trust the national news, more than triple the percentage of Republicans. Again, a much larger gap than a year ago. And finally, although Americans are turning to social media more than ever for information, they claim they trust it the least.
What is the Americans' trust or reliance on social media for accurate news?
So it's 5%
just
in 2000. Yes, just 5%, which granted, the information that Americans get on social media is friends and family, so it's good to take that into consideration.
And in a finding that seems a bit at odds with the other results, Pew says about 75% of Americans said the media does a good or fairly good job of keeping them well informed.